Okay, welcome. So today I just want to look at props. I want to look at what props we have and how we use them. But more interesting is really being safe with our props. How do we do it safe? And how do we introduce props into our classes in a way that doesn't have a stigma attached to them? So it's not like I can't do a pose, so I need a prop. It's not that I'm not doing it properly, I need a prop, but that the props just become part of the class, that automatically our students seek the props that they need, they use the props that they need, that they know how to use the props safely, and that we can spot when something is needed. So the first thing I'm going to say is I strongly recommend that you introduce the props, whatever props it is that you're planning on teaching your students about, introduce the props immediately. So if you are teaching anything on the knees, for example, that you show your students how to protect their knees. So for the knees, it's so very simple. I love the blanket across, a flat blanket across, and put them on their knees, as opposed to, but if you don't have blankets, then you can easily double up the mat and all of this kind of stuff. When I'm teaching this, I really recommend that you do that from the beginning. Teach it for everybody, because everybody's knees can benefit from the pleasure or the joy of not having so much pressure on them. And then it doesn't become a thing. What will happen is you teach it from the beginning for everybody, and the people who need it will continue. The people who don't need it probably won't bother. That's for the knees. Then we have wrists. Wrists are a really tricky place because so many people they cannot do that. They can't make that L shape with their wrist. And we've talked a lot about how weak our wrists get, because we don't do a lot with our wrists anymore. We're not putting pressure through our wrists, and it's why we want to always put people on all fours in every class, so as to develop that strength and that mobility. But in the beginning, it's very likely that they don't have it. So the first option obviously is just to change the position. So rather than being in cat, that they move to more of a dog position, so there's less strain on it if you don't have the props. Second thing to try is obviously the mat. Rolling up the mat, so you use what you've got and use as little as possible and build it up. So using the mat, and again I would start with getting everybody to do it so that everybody feels the benefit, because you may have somebody, how often even have you done it yourself in a class, where they're feeling under stress but they're going, sure, it'll be grand, I won't bother. And so getting everybody to notice the benefit of using that little bit of extra support. With wrists, like I said, wrists are a little bit trickier, because once you start to add on more support, then we really need to look at safety with it. So a popular one is blocks. Having two blocks. Well, sorry, the very first popular one is the wrists, where they make a fist. So making a fist with the wrist so that the wrist is staying straight. That has the advantage of not requiring additional gear, but it has the disadvantage of, if they haven't got strong enough wrists, that they come over on their wrist, or they come over on one wrist. It has the advantage of being even in height. It has the disadvantage of being a little bit too high maybe. But the main disadvantage is if they're not strong. Once we start adding in other things, then we really need to start paying much more attention to the safety aspect of it. So it could be that the fingers might be the issue, that they can't open out their hands, in which case being able to put a block under the wrist and the fingers can curl, that may be useful. Now we've raised the height, so you need to do it on both sides. Alternatively, it might be that this whole area can't take weight at all, in which case obviously you can come down on the elbows. Now here's the thing, watch how happens, my hips to shoulders alignment has now obviously completely changed. So there's a cost involved in that. There's a benefit to it, obviously taking them off the wrist, but there is a cost. An alternative is doing the same pose against the wall, so that you can keep the hip and shoulder alignment, but obviously now you've lost the weight bearing aspect of it. You could look at using the blocks in a different orientation. So now we've got the height, so my shoulders and hips are now in alignment, which we've seen, but the cost of that is stability. So what's the chances of the blocks going out from underneath them? If you have enough kit, you can always stack the blocks So I would need 3 blocks to get my full height, but if I happen to have 6 blocks, then I'm back to being really, really stable and having my hips and arms balanced. So as you can see, there are costs to all of the props. One is having the props in the room. The second is having the props get to the student quickly and easily so it doesn't disturb the flow of the class. And then the third is looking at the safety of the props. For all of these reasons, it's why I strongly recommend that you teach the students, all of your students, how to use your props right from the get-go. Once you introduce the props, show them, and then the following week, they can not use the props or use the props for that pose. So you can say to them as they come in, if you know for all fours, you need some props, take the props. But they've all been taught how to use the props. Another use though of props, as well as supporting weak sections, is to really develop sensation, develop pathways, and to improve the actual alignment in the pose, or to help support the student to get that feedback. Because you know yourself, you say, put your right arm out, and they don't even know where their right arm is, they don't know where their shoulder is, but putting your hand on it or getting that sensation as to where these places are in our body is really useful. And that's a really big benefit of using props for that purpose. So using props to develop feedback, develop sensation, and develop alignment. Again, using blocks, you could do something like when they're taking their arms out, have a block between them. If they're on all fours, if they're on their back, again, a block between the feet, depending on which, and a block between the knees can really support getting that sensation, getting these legs to become active and to press into it. Putting the block between the knees or the thighs, you can see, depending on the position of the block, depends on the person's body, which one makes more sense, which one is giving alignment. It could be between the thighs rather than between the knees. And this is where it's cool, because it's kind of like a problem-solving puzzle. You have to become a detective, and you have to train your students to become a detective, to sense and feel in their body, is it better between their thighs? Is it better between their knees? Is it better in any of the other orientations? So each of these blocks have 3 different lengths, say. And so the student starts to become the inquirer, and to see which gives them more strength, which gives them more stability, which gives them more alignment. So that's, if you're looking at legs, say coming into bridge, for example, you can look at using the block, and having the block really activates the outside of the legs because they have to press the block in. Equally, we may want them to activate the inside of the legs, and for that, it's the opposite, taking a belt, for example. So having a belt, you can tie it properly around the knees. The advantage of the belt is you can get it exactly aligned to the student's body. And now they are putting pressure against the belt. The belt is supporting them if they're people that put the knees, spray out their knees. And so now they've got a little bit of support for that. Because, as you can imagine, each student has a different requirement and a different need. This is why, say you're teaching bridge, teach it over 3 or 4 weeks. So the first week it might be without any support, so they kind of get a sense of feeling it. The next week you bring in the blocks so that you activate the outsides of the legs. They do it a couple of times with the block, and then they take away the block and see can they keep that kind of position. And then the third week you bring in the belt, so now you're stopping them go that way. And then by the 4th week you have all of the props available and let them choose, so that they become responsible for sensing and feeling into their body, and that they get to be curious and take ownership of how it works and how they feel. Props are great fun, and they take up a little bit of time. So if you are, and that is why, another reason I think it's really important to teach all of your class how to use it. Because someday somebody might come in with a little dicky wrist who didn't have a dicky wrist yesterday. So the benefit of having them know how to use the props means it's not going to interrupt the flow of your class. Build using the props into the flow of your class, have it set up, have them all set up for them, so that you are training them how to use them. And then it means if in the future only one person needs that they, as they arrive into the class, can pick up the prop that they know that they need, and they can use it because you've trained them, you've trained the whole class, so that the people who need them can use them as they need them, and it will really go with the flow of your class. So there you go. That's me on props. Don't remember that to train everybody how to use them so that they're available to everybody depending on what they need. Hand over responsibility to your students so you really train them how to sense and feel what that they need. Make sure they're safe. Most importantly, particularly for these wrist ones, make sure they're safe. Know that every prop has a cost. So look to see what is the cost of using that prop so that you can counterbalance that cost in another way. And finally, have some fun with it. It's really just up to your imagination how you use them, and get your students involved. They are deadly, they are really supportive, and they really support us and our students. So have some fun with it. See you next week.